Today, I'm taking you along for a tour of my very first London flat in Zone 1 that costs £1,130 a month. You'll see exactly what this price gets you in one of the most expensive parts of the city, so you can set realistic expectations for your own search. Moving to London is expensive, and finding a place to rent is one of the hardest parts, especially when you're on a tight budget. Most people think they have to settle for dodgy house shares or pay a premium to live in Zone 1. But here's the thing, you don't have to live with strangers just to afford a place in central London. I was living abroad and still managed to find a proper studio within my budget and in a location that I actually wanted. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly what I got for £1,130 a month. The pros, the cons, how I secured it from overseas, and what I do differently if I had to do it all over again. I moved to London alone 5 years ago and I had to figure it all out from scratch. Since then, I've managed to find incredible flats again and again. Apartments with swimming pools, private gyms, stunning views, and so on. The kind I used to think only existed in movies. This is episode 1 of my series, where I'll be sharing tours of every flat I've rented in London since I moved to the UK. Alright, let's dive in. Let's start with the flat itself. It was a studio located in East London, just south of Brick Lane, and an 8-minute walk from Aldgate East Station. For me, it was ideal. I was working near St. Paul's, so I could actually walk to work in about 25 minutes, which I absolutely loved. The building was on a busy street and quite old, not in the best condition. It was quite noisy, and you could actually feel the vibrations when a neighbor used their washing machine. But I never felt unsafe, even coming home late, which was a priority for me. Inside, the layout was pretty practical. On the right, there is a small bathroom with this empty corner that could be used for extra storage space. But honestly, I didn't really need it since I had just moved to the UK and it was supposed to be temporary, so I didn't bring a lot with me. The main room was a good size for a studio, and the triple wardrobe with full-length mirrors made it feel even bigger. The flat came fully furnished, bed, table, chairs, and a full kitchen setup. And here's the slightly odd detail, the fridge was tucked into a corner, literally as far away from the kitchen as possible. But it was a full-size fridge, and it's not like I had a long walk to grab my ingredients. Here is the kitchen, and to be honest, this is the reason I chose this flat. I love to cook, and it was the only one I could find that was in central London with a proper kitchen with a hob and oven. There were also a lot of cupboards, and the washing machine was a huge plus. This flat stood up to me, even though it wasn't perfect, but it had the things that mattered the most to me at the time. It was bright, spacious enough for a studio, had tons of storage, and a real kitchen, which is rare in central London. There were a few downsides as well. Some parts felt a bit cheap, like the blinds that clearly needed replacing, or the bathroom sink that wasn't connected to hot water. Now I want to talk about budget and how much I was spending on this place each month. Rent was £1,130, water came to about £20 a month, electricity worked on a top-up key system. I had to buy credit at the corner shop and load it into my meter. On average, that was about £50 a month. And council tax was £100. So in total, my monthly housing costs were roughly £1,300. One thing that helped balance the budget a little was the location. Because it was so central, I was just walking everywhere and I hardly ever needed public transport. That saved me anywhere from £100 to £150 a month, easily. So the rent was high, but at least I was avoiding expensive, long commute. And this felt like a real luxury. At the time, this setup took up about 75% of my monthly income, which I know is a lot. But honestly, I really wanted to live in central London, even if it meant eating pasta 7 days a week. And it was temporary. I wasn't planning to spend this much of my income long term. But for me, the trade-off felt worth it. So if you're looking at studios in London, especially in Zone 1, this gives you a realistic idea of what you might need to budget, and the kind of compromise that can make it work. I compromised on the older building and a location on a noisy street for the overall location in Zone 1 and a proper kitchen in my flat. I was still living abroad when I secured this flat, and if I hadn't followed this one strategy, I would have completely missed out. I'll show you exactly what I did next. So how did I manage to rent a flat without even being in London? Well, it started with a deep dive in every property app I could find. Rightmove, Zoopla, OpenRent, Spare Room, all of them. I was searching every single day, filtering any new listing within an 80 to 90 minute walking radius from my future office near St. Paul's, because being able to walk to work was a non-negotiable for me. By the way, I do not recommend using multiple apps. This is not efficient at all. If I could go back in time, I would focus only on one. It would have saved me time and frustration. If you want more tips on the actual search process, I made a whole video on this topic, I'll link it here. I started my search about 2 months before my move. And honestly, it wasn't easy. I saw so many listings without windows, or kitchens that were basically just a mini fridge and a dirty sink. Definitely not what I would consider decent living conditions. Then one day I found the one. A proper studio, bright, full kitchen, and way above average for the price. I contacted the agent through every app I could, and nothing. Radio silence. I was so frustrated. I knew this place was rare and I really didn't want to miss it. That's when I did something that changed everything. I sent a message again, but this time offering to pay 3 months upfront. If I agreed to sign a lease after a proper viewing, of course. Never send money before seeing the place. I didn't even know if I could fully afford to pay 3 months upfront, but that wasn't the point. The goal was to stand out and get a reply. And it worked. After weeks of being ignored, the agent replied within the hour and booked me in for a viewing. Now, obviously I couldn't go myself as I wasn't in London yet. I reached out to my friends and eventually we found a friend of a friend of a friend who was in London and willing to go to the viewing for me. She met the agent at the flat and FaceTimed me to show me everything. I think there is a big difference between a friend FaceTiming you and the agent doing it. If an agent says they will video call you from the flat, this could be a red flag. They could be hiding things and there is no one there to verify what you're saying. If you can't send a friend, here are a few other options that you can consider. You could fly to London for a couple of days and batch as many viewings as you can. Of course, a short trip like that will only be doable if you're coming from Europe. Flights can be under £100 and it could really save you thousands in the long run. Another option would be to join local expat groups like French in London, Spanish in London. Whatever your country is, there is probably a group for you. These communities are often very helpful and someone might be willing to help you out. If that doesn't work, another option would be to hire a professional viewer. I know there are platforms that offer this, but I've never tried it myself. But that's something I'm actually considering offering in the future. I love going to viewings so much, I could do it all day long. Anyway, once I confirmed that I wanted the flat, I paid the holding deposit, which is usually 1 week's rent. It's deducted from your first rent payment, so it's not an extra fee. It's just to make sure that nobody else can get it while you're going through background checks. If an agent asks for more than a week's rent for the holding deposit, be careful. This could be a scam. By the way, even though I offered, the agent never asked me to pay the 3 months upfront in the end. But offering it is what got me the viewing. Then when I arrived in London a few weeks later, I signed the lease, got the keys, and moved in. And just in case something went wrong, I also booked a hostel for a few nights. I highly recommend having a backup plan like that. And if you couldn't find a flat before arriving in London, don't panic. You could book an Airbnb or a hostel for 7 to 10 days and dedicate your first week in London to viewings. Places come and go extremely quickly in London. So going from viewing a flat to moving in only a couple of days is perfectly doable. So there you have it, a tour of my very first flat in London, how much I paid for it, and how I managed to get it while living abroad. Now keep in mind, this was a few years ago and the rental market in London changes fast. So if you want current insights of what studio flats are worth in London, you can watch this video next.